Welcome back, everyone. This is the Oracle Sees Through Masked Lies. Let's start decoding a big symbolic player in this whole cover story of this viral panic. The wearing of masks within it. Dee and I know that the Liar Liar Pants on Fire Secret Drama Society, that's what we call the people who are actually running the show behind this hideous production, they love their masks and use them in all of their stories. But in this one in particular, they're doing it right out front in the open. So let's go beyond what's to be taken at face value, getting us all to be in fear of the cooties and then fearing each other. Because that's exactly what has gone on here over the time since the beginning of spring as this viral panic story has unfolded. The other thing that's being programmed in us here with the use of masks in this cover story about this virus is to get us used to concealing our faces out in the open. It's also to make us all subconsciously accept that covering our mouths, that very strong but effective nonverbal way to communicate, be silent, goes with this, and I won't. So let's take a look at some things that we've already discovered throughout our previous video pieces and start plugging them in here, also with the help of our all-seeing eye or oracle here. So if you haven't already seen our previous video series, Jesus, starring Orion and Sun, I recommend you take a look at that, at least to start out here, because we're going to plug some things in that we looked at in that video series in as we get started. So also in previous segments, we had started to take a look at how this viral panic story was unfolding on the timeline. And now that it's gotten a little bit deeper into it, we have more time to take a look at and see how things connect. So let's take a little bit of a look back and then start plugging things forward in as we go forward with the information that we have now. All right, so remember that when we commonly, what we commonly call February 26th of 2020, what coincided this year with what is known as Ash Wednesday, the beginning of the 40-day season of Lent or season of sacrifice practiced by many Christians and specifically Roman Catholics. This coincided with an announcement from the first time from the White House here in what we commonly call the United States that a task force was being assembled about this coming virus. That just 2 weeks later, on what we commonly call March 13th, that happened to coincide with February the 13th this year, the President of the United States declares a national emergency at that press conference he gave in the U.S. over this virus. Now, this is right smack in the middle of the 40-day season of Lent or the season of sacrifice, right? In the middle of this viral panic timeline. And we decoded the meaning that was symbolically going along with this cover story, with this religious holiday, specifically the Roman Catholic season of Lent going into Easter Sunday and through it is what we predicted at the time. And I'm recording this at what we commonly call April 20th of 2020. So we're significantly past Easter, and now we have the benefit of seeing how, at least to that point, the timeline has unfolded. So let's plug some things in here and start decoding both the picture that the sky story is giving us at this time of year in the northern hemisphere when the sun has returned to this area of the world, bringing warmer and brighter days with it. Let's take a look at that sky story in combination, once again, with this viral panic timeline that's unfolding at exactly the same time. All right, so what I want to point out that in this sky story, during the season of Lent, beginning on Ash Wednesday, we are watching a coupled journey, right? When we're looking and decoding not just the story of Jesus, but many other ancient myths and even modern day stories. They are all dressing up these characters in the sky story as different characters telling different stories for different cultures, for different times, and this is just yet another version of that. And that's the coupling of the constellation of Orion and the position of the sun. And what we're looking at here is the coupling of those two things, the constellation of Orion and the position of the sun, as it relates to a specific date in the northern hemisphere, what we commonly call February 26th of 2020, and that is Ash Wednesday this year. So the constellation of Orion, remember, is just breaching the eastern horizon above the Earth at that time. When you cue up a stellarium look at a picture of the sky, this very special place of the north-south meridian where it crosses the red arc of the ecliptic, the all-seeing eye or the oracle, right? That's that same area. If we cue up that area of the sky and look at high noon, on Ash Wednesday, you see that Orion's bow is just breaching the horizon. But then when you look again on what is commonly celebrated as Easter Sunday this year, what we commonly call April 12th of 2020, you can see that the constellation of Orion is fully risen for the first time at high noon above the eastern horizon of the Earth in the northern hemisphere. And if you follow Orion's bow, it's pointing directly at the sun in the constellation of Pisces that is now off the cross of the north-south meridian line in the ecliptic. And the sky story correlates with the story perfectly that we're given of the story of Jesus over Easter Sunday and then the story of Jesus' resurrection when you look at this sky story picture again. So plugging this information in to our timeline, we're going to take a look even deeper at this tie-in, at this viral panic timeline to the sky story, and starting with what was occurring smack in the middle of this 40-day season of Lent or season of sacrifice this year, which was this announcement by the President of the United States on Friday the 13th, this national emergency over this virus. So just to plug some more information in about Friday the 13th and how it ties in specifically and was an intentional part of the cover story here, is that Friday the 13th in part got its reputation because of the story about the Knights Templars. So I'm not going to get into this very deeply, but the Knights Templars you can research on your own, and many scholars have that can tell you a lot more about this than I will, but they were a big part of the Christian Crusades. They were the military arm of the Roman Catholic Church. And in 1307, the Pope at the time, the story goes, turned on the Knights Templars, had them rounded up and burned at the stake. And a great number of them that were burned at the stake altogether apparently happened to coincide with that date in 1307 being on Friday the 13th. But what I want you to look at is this symbol of the Knights Templar, the red cross. And this is the secret, right? The secret societies, all of these world governments, world religions, those that we collectively call the Liar Liar Pants on Fire Secret Drama Society, where all the world is their stage and they play their stage plays out all over the world behind masks and occulted stories. They're all in the know about this symbol, this Red Cross symbol. The secret is about this all-seeing eye or this oracle, this special crossing point of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic. That's the cross that they're all sworn by secrecy or silence to protect. Where else have you seen this Red Cross symbol these days? Well, of course, it ties in intentionally And right along with the floating naval hospital, that big white ship with the big red cross, 2 of them actually, stationed on the coasts of the east and west coast of the United States because of this viral panic. And we also learned in a previous video segment that this ties in with the term quarantine that we started to hear for the first time right around Friday the 13th. The term quarantine being a naval term, and it's essentially an imprisonment of such for a period of exactly 40 days. Exactly, no coincidence, the same 40 days of the season of sacrifice or the season of Lent practiced by specifically Roman Catholic Christians. Remember that we are also taking a look in a previous video segment about the tradition of Mardi Gras, specifically Fat Tuesday, because Fat Tuesday is the day that is right before Ash Wednesday. And the tradition got started, remember, because this 40-day season of Lent or season of sacrifice means that practicing Christians, specifically Roman Catholics, during this tradition and during this time are taught to give up things or sacrifice things like alcohol, sex, fatty, rich meats. Meat is a big tradition that is something that's sacrificed during this period. And so Fat Tuesday, the tradition began a frenzied party, right, where you let it all hang out and you indulge yourself, maybe overindulge yourself one last time in alcohol and party time atmosphere and the eating of the rich fatty meats, that it's going to be the last time that any of those things are going to be experienced for you, right? No gatherings of any kind are also something that should be sacrificed along with the alcohol and the rich fatty meats during the 40-day season of Lent or the season of sacrifice. But one of the traditions that many people associate with Mardi Gras for good reason is because it's a long-standing one, and that's the wearing of masks. So let's plug in the wearing of masks during Mardi Gras with, at least here in the American culture, what we can associate now with this Friday the 13th occurrence this year along this viral panic story that we've been given. If you live here in American culture, another thing that would be easily associated when you hear Friday the 13th is the movie series Friday the 13th, right? And the star of that show is Jason Voorhees, right? The serial killer that no matter how many times he's killed over and over again, he just comes back or resurrects in the next movie. And he's the one wearing the hockey mask, right? But most people probably don't think about this, and I certainly didn't until we learned about what we're going to show you next here and go a little bit more deeper into. But the tradition of Mardi Gras and this entire Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday season of sacrifice tradition is tied in with Halloween. It's coupled, in other words, very similarly to the coupling of the constellation of Orion and the sun in many of these stories, because it's coupled in the sky this way. We're also finding out as we go forward that we found another coupling that gives us perhaps a way to predict the future here with this oracle, this real all-seeing eye, and perhaps this kind of thing is the reason that oracles got the reputation that they did, even though we had no idea what they meant at the time. All right, so let's see how things like Mardi Gras, the wearing of masks, Friday the 13th, and Halloween tie together here on this viral panic story timeline and the story that is given in the all-seeing eye or the oracle sky story above our heads. We're going to tie some pieces of information we've already looked at in specifically the oracle eyes the timeline pirates and when the rising sun caught a cold. Previous videos that we did, so you can take a look and get caught up there as well. So we're going to go to time.com's website, and we're going to plug in some information they provide about the history behind 5 of New Orleans' favorite Mardi Gras traditions in an article that you can find there about the subject. We're going to just focus in on what they have to say briefly about the tradition of masks and costumes at Mardi Gras. Masks and costumes have been associated with Shrove Tuesday, which is also Fat Tuesday, keep in mind, celebrations for centuries. And even today, of the masks commonly seen in New Orleans on Mardi Gras, this is what I want to emphasize, are the same types popularized by the 2 to 3 week long Carnivale in Venice that culminates with Fat Tuesday. So let's stop there. Venice is in Italy, so we've got the same region of the world where the Pope in Vatican City, right, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, can be found. And we're talking about the same religious holy days or holidays. Okay, so same region of the world. And also know that Carnivale, this 2 to 3 week long tradition that's also associated with this time of year, occurs throughout Europe, not just in the region of Italy, but throughout Europe, into Latin America, Central America in some places, and even South America in some regions. So this is a very commonly found celebrated time of year, and it's known as Carnivale. So going on with the article, it says, but masking and costume wearing in New Orleans also has a specifically American history, as it was another way for revelers who were officially excluded from the festivities to join in by concealing their identities. And the last sentence from the article I'm going to read right now is to plug in is, these days the Mardi Gras tradition has earned a special exemption from the Louisiana law that generally bans concealing or disguising one's face in public. So there's a good reason why you want to know exactly who it is that you're talking to, right? So that there's a truthful communication, or if any kind of agreement is going to be reached, you know who to hold someone, you know who to hold accountable, in other words, right? That's the whole purpose of not masking your face. So we're going to tie some things now into the sky story. So in another video segment, we learned there was a very special wink phenomenon that we discovered at around this exact same time, if we look from the Northern Hemisphere viewer's perspective at the midnight sky. So remember, we started looking specifically at the constellation of Libra in what we commonly call February. And so this is going to take us into the time, right, which is also when Mardi Gras occurred, and taking us into the 40-day season of Lent, or season of sacrifice, at around the same time. That's what's going on in the sky story picture. So we started watching Libra in February, and what we noticed on February 19th of 2020 is that the first 2 stars of Libra were first visible on the eastern horizon, and we watched the journey as we'd expect, even as amateur stargazers, right? That stars move incrementally along their path, rising more and more along the arc of the ecliptic above the eastern horizon as they move on their journey, traveling up, and as they rise in the east, up the arc of the ecliptic and setting in the west. Now, when we were watching specifically the constellation of Libra, by the time we got to the date we commonly call March 8th of 2020, the constellation of Libra, all the stars of it, were fully risen for the first time at midnight above the eastern horizon of the Earth. But then we looked the very next night at the same time and found something that we shouldn't have with the constellation of Libra, where it should have been even more fully risen above the eastern horizon of the Earth. We find that it's more than, well, not more than, but halfway descended back into the Earth's horizon. And that's not something that we are taught should be happening. and it's not the incremental movement that is expected when you're watching the stars normally along their path, moving more up above the eastern horizon and then rising as they fall into the western horizon. But when we looked again at what we commonly call March 23rd, so now we're over the period of Friday the 13th this year at the same time, remember, we noticed that again the constellation of Libra was fully risen again. All the stars of the constellation fully risen above the Earth's horizon in the east on the arc of the ecliptic. This is a discovery, this wink. It's a phenomenon that we discovered was the real reason for the changeover from the old Julian calendar, or the old gods calendar, to what we use today, the Gregorian calendar, or God's new calendar, authored by the Roman Catholic Church. Those are the authorities of that current timeline, you see. And we also found out that this wink phenomenon that the all-seeing eye is doing at this time of the year in the spring in the northern hemisphere, evidenced by watching the path of the constellation of Libra, well, this isn't something that is described in our given heliocentric model of the universe either. And who gives us our given heliocentric model of the universe that is taught in schools all over the world? Well, it's the same astronomers, right, that worked for centuries, all this time for what is now still the Roman Catholic Church. Tying these things together, we see it's the same people that are hiding all of these same stories. They're actually hiding reality, God's reality, the one that the real God, the real Creator created for us all to see. But these occulted men who made these discoveries occulted them in dark stories and in beliefs. From ancient myths and stories to the modern day stories you see in movies and on your televisions in modern day, including this viral panic story we've been given. It's all the world is a stage. That's what they say, right? So what we're looking at here is we're unknowingly performing in these stage plays that are going on and we have no idea about them. Or you can think about it as we're engaging in rituals to celebrate these things as holidays. But we're doing so because we're told stories about them being for something else entirely. This is another way that these realities are being occulted and are held above our heads. They're masked. And this is a very ancient cult who is doing this same act over and over and over again. So keep in mind, like we said, this winking this year in the springtime in what we commonly call the Northern Hemisphere is occurring during this viral panic story we've been given. Mardi Gras, Friday the 13th, all of the masks tying in with the viral panic story as well. But remember, this coupled journey of Orion and the sun, and this coupling is also seen in the stories that are being presented over and over again, because there's a coupling of the journey going on with how this all-seeing eye or oracle or this wheel in the sky turns. Mirror imaging or coupling, it's so apparent throughout so many stories for this reason also. You have to consider that what we're looking at is a picture of what's going on in the northern hemisphere. So in the southern hemisphere, what we're experiencing as springtime, they're experiencing as fall. So as we would expect, then looking at the all-seeing eye or the oracle, back from the Northern Hemisphere viewer's perspective, we learned that there is a mirror image phenomenon to this wink phenomenon that is occurring in the springtime. It occurs in its mirror image form in the fall here. So remember, we took a look at what occurs when we commonly celebrate what we call Halloween in the Northern Hemisphere, another tradition associated with the wearing of masks. So remember that when we are taking a look at what happens at around Halloween, we're looking at a different version of the all-seeing eye, right? The wheel has turned. So instead of Libra that we were tracking, it's Cancer in the autumn sky at midnight. And we are watching the journey of Cancer and the constellations still below the Earth's horizon at this time of Leo, Hydra, and Canis Major, or the lion, the snake, and the dog. And over the next day, we watch the stars do what we expect, incremental, rising a little bit more above the eastern horizon, Cancer was, at least, and continuing along their incremental journey, rising on the arc of the ecliptic above the eastern horizon, and then setting in the west. But when we went one more day to what we commonly call November 2nd of this year at midnight, we noticed this wink phenomenon occur in its mirror image form, where we found not an incremental rising of the constellations we were tracking, but just in one night, a sudden jump. We can see now the lion head, the snake head, and the dog head of the constellations of Leo, Hydra, and Canis Major far above the eastern horizon, much further than they should be on their expected incremental dance up and to the west along the arc of the ecliptic. Again, not a phenomenon we're taught about in our given heliocentric model of the universe, but one that does happen in the Creator's reality nonetheless. This gives us a way by when we're decoding what's appearing in the actual sky above our heads, a way to keep both eyes out for a possible mirror image of this viral panic story that we've been given to occur yet again, a return you can expect in the fall, specifically coordinating with Halloween. They love their masks, and it's for many layered reasons, but when you get to the root of it, we're about to find out, because something new is being dressed up and put on the world stage for all of us to think is something different. So let's go back to the Time website article we were looking at about Mardi Gras and end things with something very fascinating that they ended the article with. King cakes. Likely one of the many carnival traditions brought over by the French settlers who landed in North America, this cake with a baby Jesus figurine baked inside is a symbol of the Epiphany, the day when the three kings brought gifts to the baby Jesus. The round cake, which nowadays comes decked out in green, gold, and purple icing, dates back to the Middle Ages when European Christians feasted before the Lenten fast. Like many Christian folk traditions, it may originally have had pagan origins. During Saturnalia, the ancient Roman winter solstice celebration of the deity Saturn, the person who found a special item hidden in a cake would be king of the day, according to a French culinary encyclopedia. But as NPR has reported, the precise reason behind the tiny baby figure in the cake may be a little bit more down to earth. It was a surplus supply of French porcelain dollhouse figures, chanced upon by a New Orleans baker in the 1940s, that first gave the cake that local spin. Well, that was a whole lot of layered symbolism given in just that one ending of this article that I certainly didn't expect. But let's plug it in and decode it, because it is very useful information nonetheless. So this is also going to correlate specifically to our previous video when the rising sun caught a cold, as we end things and tie things together here with this information about king cakes. So let's take a look at the picture of the sky story once again as we end things here on the date commonly called April 12th of 2020 in the northern hemisphere at high noon when the sun is at its zenith, found in the constellation of Pisces off the cross of the north-south meridian line and the ecliptic. This is the day this year celebrated as Easter Sunday. And as we know that we're looking at a coupled journey, the location of the sun, we just saw where that was. Let's take a look at the constellation of Orion. This day, for the first time in the northern hemisphere, once again, fully risen. All the constellation of Orion fully risen above the eastern horizon of the earth on Easter Sunday. And where Orion's bow is pointing, if you follow it, is to the sun, to which Orion's journey is coupled throughout many stories, from ancient times to the modern day. But let's couple that with what we just learned about king cakes. Most of us know that the 3 stars of Orion's belt line up with the 3 stars, or the 3 pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Now that certainly could be the 3 kings. But let's take a look when we're plugging in the constellation of Orion and the sun's coupled journey with the story of Jesus. Perhaps this isn't just the tradition that brought us these king cakes at Mardi Gras, but also everybody's birthday cake. Because as you can see, the constellation of Orion being risen for the first time on Easter Sunday at high noon above the Earth's horizon, pointing his bow right to the sun. That also is a symbolic representation then of the candles on your birthday cake and why it is a birthday cake to begin with. Orion is reborn at this time of the year, year after year after year. When we plug all of this information in and take a look at the story we've been given about this viral panic, considering that this is all being coordinated with all of the world's leadership or governments and all of the world's religions for specific religious holy days or holidays that occur at exactly this time of year. We realize that what we're looking at here is a cover story with this viral panic for something new, a one world new contract, a new covenant. Something new is being birthed all over the world on the world stage. We'll end things there and pick it back up in our next piece. And until then, be well.